Did you know that Max Verstappen rescued Red Bull from a potential technical crisis with a single maneuver at Imola? What seemed like just another race turned into a lesson in strategy, audacity, and pure on-track intelligence. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think this Verstappen victory marks the return of Red Bull's dominance? What exactly happened in that overtake on Piastri that could change the course of the championship? In this video, we're going to break down everything that happened at the 2025 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen not only won the race, but also sent a clear message to McLaren and the rest of the grid. The 2025 Formula One season has so far been one of the most unpredictable in recent years, with McLaren starting the championship surprisingly dominant, thanks to a car that was extremely efficient in fast corners and long straights. Many began to think that Red Bull had lost the technical leadership that had characterized its golden era with Verstappen since 2021. Oscar Piastri, a young Australian driver, not only won 3 of the first 4 races, in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Miami, but he did so with a forcefulness that evoked the years of absolute dominance of legendary figures such as Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher. The entire paddock was talking about a new era, and McLaren was positioning itself as the team to beat. Everything indicated that Piastri was on his way to creating his own legend. Imola, therefore, wasn't just another race. It was the symbolic ground where Piastri had the chance to equal the record of 4 consecutive victories at that circuit, a historic mark set by Senna in the 1990s. Meanwhile, Red Bull arrived in Italy with doubts, internal pressures, and a Max Verstappen who, despite his status as a 4-time world champion, was receiving criticism from some media outlets who spoke of a supposed loss of motivation or leadership within the team. The atmosphere was charged. Christian Horner, team principal, knew that Imola was a kind of point of no return. If they didn't show clear signs of recovery, McLaren would not only slip away in points, but also in morale. And that's something no champion team can afford so early in the season. Therefore, expectations were enormous. Verstappen, for his part, remained silent, but worked day and night with his engineers in Milton Keynes to prepare a technical package that could close the gap. The Imola circuit, with its tragic history and challenging technical characteristics, offered the perfect setting for a high-voltage battle. Aggressive braking, tight chicanes, and rapid pace changes make it a track where the driver matters as much as the car. It's a track that doesn't forgive mistakes and rewards boldness. In that context, it was a true test of fire. The pressure was different for each driver. For Piastri, it was the opportunity to enter the Olympus of the greats with his 4th consecutive victory at that historic McLaren temple. For Verstappen, it was the moment to prove that he is still the most complete driver in the world and that Red Bull hasn't had its last say. Added to this equation was a fundamental psychological element, the growing rivalry between the 2 drivers. Although it's not yet an open enmity like the one we saw years ago between Hamilton and Rosberg, the truth is that there is a tense respect between Max and Oscar. Each represents a different philosophy: Piastri, methodical, cerebral, restrained; Verstappen, impulsive, aggressive, emotional. This duality of styles is reflected not only on the track, but also in his statements. While the Australian tends to measure his words, Max has never had a problem speaking his mind. That latent tension, that contrast in personalities, made Imola an explosive setting. Both knew that winning there wasn't just a matter of points, it was a matter of authority. It was a message to the other about who was in charge this season. What's interesting is that, despite being behind in the standings, Verstappen arrived with renewed conviction. He didn't say much, but his body language and the way he handled each free practice session revealed total determination. The team knew it too. Red Bull had invested a large portion of its development tokens in this weekend, betting everything on an upgrade package that, if it failed, could jeopardize the entire 2025 project. That's why, when the race began, there was something different about the way Max positioned his car on the grid. It wasn't just a good start, it was a declaration of war. Although the Imola Grand Prix made it abundantly clear that Red Bull and Verstappen still have a lot to say this season, rumors began to circulate in the days following the race that, if confirmed, could completely shake the team's internal stability. Verstappen's impeccable performance, combined with the unresolved tensions the team has been carrying since the end of 2024, has rekindled speculation about his continued presence beyond the short term. In various specialized forums and international media, a possibility that seemed buried has once again gained traction. Ferrari's alleged interest in securing the Dutch champion's services starting in 2026, the year in which F1's new technical regulations will come into effect. And this is not an isolated rumor, nor one devoid of context. Some sources even claim that there have already been discreet contacts between emissaries from Maranello and Verstappen's entourage, and that the offer would be not only financial but also structural, giving the driver a decisive role in the design of the Italian team's future car. These kinds of rumors aren't new, but what makes them especially relevant now is the timing of their emergence. Red Bull has just proven it can recover technically, yes, but the team's stability has been called into question by internal leaks, administrative tensions, and strategic differences between the top brass. Over the past few months, there has been talk of a split between Helmut Marko, Christian Horner, and the new shareholders linked to Red Bull Austria. In this context, Max's role has been exposed. While he has always been considered the project's flagship driver, some reports indicate that he has been uncomfortable with certain decisions made behind his back, particularly regarding the technical development of the RB21 and resource management for the upcoming season. Although he appears focused and committed publicly, there is growing unease behind closed doors. And Ferrari, seeing this rift, is reportedly ready to act. From Italy, the renowned media outlet La Gazzetta dello Sport recently hinted that Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur sees Verstappen not only as a driver capable of returning the team to the top of the championship, but also as a figure around whom to build a new sporting project. The idea would be that, taking advantage of Carlos Sainz's expiring contract, Ferrari would seek a star-studded lineup for 2026, with Verstappen and Charles Leclerc as the duo. Too ambitious? Perhaps. But in F1, where sporting, media, and economic interests constantly intersect, nothing is completely off the table. Max, for his part, has never publicly ruled out racing for Ferrari at some point in his career. And while he has reiterated his firm commitment to Red Bull, he has also hinted that he wants an environment where he has complete freedom to influence every aspect of performance. Furthermore, the most attentive analysts have noticed one detail. For a few weeks now, Verstappen has avoided speaking in terms of a future with Red Bull in post-race interviews. He has focused more on the here and now, and statements like, "My job is to get the best out of this car every weekend," or, "I'm not thinking beyond this season." While these statements may sound like a sign of focus, they could also be interpreted as a sign of internal uncertainty about what will come next. And that further fuels the speculation. Is Max leaving certain doors open for strategic reasons? Or is he really considering a change if Red Bull doesn't guarantee him the control he seeks in F1's new technical era? The truth is that, behind the Imola performance, the perfect overtaking, and the technical performance, there is a developing story that could become the focus of the driver market in the coming months. Verstappen's stature is too valuable to be overlooked, and if Ferrari or even Mercedes decide to make a change for 2026, the Dutchman's name will be at the top of their lists. This would not only impact the balance of power between teams, but also the type of cars we'll see developed 2 years from now. Max isn't just a driver, he's a brand, a mentality, and a working model. And whoever wants him in their garage will have to adapt to that. Red Bull's position regarding everything happening around Max Verstappen is, at the same time, firm in its public discourse but increasingly delicate in its internal reality. Officially, the team continues to support the Dutchman as its cornerstone, as the untouchable figure upon whom its era of success has been built. However, behind closed doors, a more complex atmosphere prevails. The pressure to remain competitive comes not only from the track, but also from Verstappen himself, who in recent years has consolidated a role of absolute leadership that goes beyond the sporting aspect. Max is no longer simply another driver in the team. He is, to all intents and purposes, the linchpin of the project. His influence is felt in every technical decision, in the planning of updates, in the simulations prior to each race, and even in the strategic discussions that take place during engineering meetings. This level of direct involvement, which in other contexts might seem excessive, has been key to building a winning Red Bull, but it has also generated inevitable tensions between the different areas of the team, which now have to balance their ideas with the will of a driver who refuses to compromise if he believes they hinder performance. In this context, Verstappen's performance at Imola was much more than a victory. It was confirmation that his understanding of the championship was correct and that his insistence on accelerating certain technical modifications had been decisive. The new aerodynamic design of the RB21, with improvements to the side pods, adjustments to the flow of the Coke bottle, and a reinterpretation of his side air intakes, had been championed by Max since the beginning of the year. Although some within the team felt the focus should be on other areas of the car, it was his persistence that ultimately tipped the balance. And the results were evident from the first day on track. The car's improved efficiency in medium and high-speed corners, one of its main weaknesses compared to McLaren, allowed Red Bull to recover 0.2 per lap, a key figure on a track as technical as Imola. This type of direct impact further strengthens Verstappen's position within the team and, at the same time, gives him more tools to claim a level of autonomy that few drivers in the history of Formula One have had. This prominence isn't always easy to manage. Although from the outside everything seems under control, the truth is that within Red Bull there are different sensibilities regarding how much freedom Max should be given. Some within the team consider his involvement essential to maintaining the level of excellence that has characterized them since 2021. But there are also those who are concerned how certain decisions are beginning to depend too much on a single voice. The departure of key figures in the engineering department, rumors of strategic disagreements within the technical leadership, and even the secrecy with which some simulator tests are handled point to a team that, while continuing to win, could be entering a delicate transition period. Verstappen has managed to position himself as Red Bull's sporting compass, but that also means that any deviation from his expectations can turn into an internal crisis. And in a sport where the margins for error are minimal, a team's emotional and technical stability is as important as its on-track pace. The question then arises whether Red Bull is willing to continue evolving around Verstappen or if, at some point, it will seek to regain a more institutional balance that is less dependent on the driver. The history of F1 is full of teams that have experienced similar situations. We saw it with Senna at McLaren, with Schumacher at Ferrari, and even with Hamilton at Mercedes. When a driver becomes the sole focus of the project, the results can be glorious, but they can also become fragile in the face of any change in the environment. What differentiates these cases is the team's ability to adapt without losing its identity. And in the case of Red Bull, its identity has been so intertwined with Verstappen in recent years that imagining a team without him seems, today, almost impossible. But Formula One waits for no one. If Red Bull wants to maintain that unique bond with Verstappen, it will have to demonstrate not only that it can continue to offer him a winning car, but also that it is willing to grant him the level of influence he demands. That means investing in the areas he considers priority, adjusting internal processes to his working style, and, above all, guaranteeing that he will not be surpassed strategically or technically by any other team. Because if Max feels he cannot continue to grow within Red Bull, if he detects that his scope of action is reduced or that his decisions are no longer being executed as before, he will not hesitate to look to other horizons. And that risk is not hypothetical. It is as real as the pressure experienced every race weekend. Max Verstappen's victory in the 2025 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix represents much more than just a points tally in the championship standings. In reality, this race marks a change in narrative, a break from the dominant thread that until now had positioned McLaren and Oscar Piastri as the owners of the season. What seemed like a campaign destined for orange dominance began to fracture at that exact moment when Max executed the overtake at Tamburello. It was a surgical move, yes, but also symbolic. It showed that Red Bull was not finished, that the champion remains a defining factor, and that, despite the difficulties at the start of the year, no one can write off a team that has proven time and again that it knows how to reinvent itself under pressure. The consequences of this victory are not limited to a single race. They can completely change the dynamics of the championship and alter McLaren's confidence, the balance of power on the grid, and above all, the immediate future of the category. The first thing that changes with this victory is the psychological axis of the championship. Before Imola, Oscar Piastri was building an image of invincibility. Not only was he winning, but he did so with clinical composure, almost error-free, setting a pace that forced everyone else to race from behind. He was the new benchmark, but losing to Verstappen, and doing so on a circuit as symbolically charged as Imola, where McLaren sought to revive Senna's legend, leaves an emotional wound that could have lasting effects. Piastri's sense of invulnerability is no longer the same. His body language after the race, his more restrained statements, and the way he avoided controversy indicate that he felt the blow beyond just a sporting one. And that could lead to a change in his racing style. The pressure now increases, because he must not only maintain the lead but also demonstrate that he can respond when aggressively attacked. And Verstappen is, by nature, a driver who smells blood. Secondly, the internal position within McLaren could begin to strain. Lando Norris, who has been climbing the championship ladder, is now dangerously close to his teammate in points. A situation that, in any team, can trigger silent disputes over strategic priorities and resource allocation. If McLaren doesn't manage this internal conflict skillfully, it risks opening unnecessary fronts just when it needs to be more united than ever to maintain its advantage over Red Bull. F1 history is littered with cases where internal struggles end up costing championships. And Verstappen, from his position in the trenches, knows how to take advantage of any rift in the competition. He already did so in previous seasons, and everything indicates that he has learned to capitalize not only on others' mistakes on the track, but also on disagreements behind the pits. On the other hand, the victory at Imola strengthens Red Bull's technical project at a time when its direction was most questioned. The effectiveness of the update package not only resolved specific problems with the RB21, but also gave the team confidence to accelerate development for the following races. The way they took advantage of the virtual safety car, controlled tire degradation, and strategic precision throughout the weekend were clear signs that the team had found its way back. That sense of quiet dominance can be more dangerous than any single victory. Because once Red Bull feels comfortable with its technical package, they often enter a winning streak that's difficult to stop. And if that pattern repeats itself, McLaren could be forced to divert resources to the present, jeopardizing some of the development projected for 2026. The impact also reaches the political level of F1. Rival teams can no longer focus solely on McLaren. They must once again pay attention to a Red Bull that, in addition to having one of the most competitive drivers of the modern era, is once again demonstrating a superior technical capacity for reaction. This directly affects how internal budgets are distributed, how car development roadmaps are re-evaluated, and how the priority map for the second half of the championship is defined. Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin, all will have to rethink their strategy if Verstappen and Red Bull maintain this pace. And that inevitably fuels a domino effect that's reflected in the driver market, corporate decisions, and even technical alliances between teams. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the victory at Imola restores Max Verstappen to a central place in the championship narrative. It's no longer just about defending his legacy, but about rewriting it in real time. If he can recover from behind the season, in an adverse context, with a team undergoing an internal rebuild, his name will once again be among the greatest in the history of the sport. And he knows it. Max has never competed only for titles. He competes to transcend. And every time he's pushed against the wall, he responds with performances that redefine what's possible. Imola was that. A reminder. A warning. And if anyone thought the Verstappen era was coming to an end, they probably didn't fully understand how his mentality works. With Verstappen's victory at Imola still resonating throughout the paddock, projections for the championships near future take on a level of complexity that no team can afford to ignore. What seemed like a championship tilted toward McLaren's early dominance has been abruptly put on hold. Now, every technical decision, every strategic move, and every public statement become key pieces on a chessboard that changes shape race by race. The updates Red Bull presented in Italy weren't simply a one-off improvement, but the first hint of a more ambitious plan already underway. In the halls of Milton Keynes, the word most heard isn't recover, but take control. And that changes everything. Because if Formula One has made one thing clear over the last decade, it's that when Red Bull identifies a technical advantage, it knows how to exploit it to the fullest. The next stage where this new dynamic will be put to the test will be Monaco. A very different circuit from Imola, much more demanding in terms of traction, millimeter precision in slow corners, and extreme space management. But Red Bull isn't underestimating it. In fact, it has chosen Monaco as the perfect laboratory to introduce new parts that could be key in the medium term. Among the most notable is a variable profile front wing, specifically designed to generate optimal downforce in low-speed sectors, where McLaren has traditionally held a slight advantage this year. Furthermore, it has been leaked that Verstappen will test an evolution of the ERS system, with improved thermal efficiency designed for urban heat conditions, something that can make a difference on tight tracks like the Principalities. Red Bull's approach is clear: attack on all fronts. It's no longer just about withstanding pressure, but about generating doubt in the rival, breaking their rhythm, and forcing them to make mistakes under pressure. But while Red Bull accelerates, McLaren faces a strategic dilemma of enormous significance. On the one hand, its car remains one of the most consistent on the grid, with an aerodynamic balance that adapts well to most circuits on the calendar. However, its development has begun to show signs of stagnation. The team prioritized conservative development at Imola, focusing on details such as rear-end cooling and minimal suspension adjustments. Although these decisions were justified by the need to maintain reliability, the result exposed a larger problem. While Red Bull advances, McLaren appears to be 2 steps behind in terms of technical aggressiveness. Internal sources suggest that much of the technical team is already working with an eye toward 2026, a year in which the regulations will change, and where all teams want to have a structural advantage. But that comes at a cost. Neglecting the present could result in the 2025 title being handed over without a real fight. In this context, the next 3 races will be crucial. Monaco, Canada, and Spain represent 3 completely different challenges in terms of track design, tire strategy, and setup requirements. If Red Bull can maintain the upward trend shown at Imola, it will not only level the points in the Drivers' Championship, but will also begin to tip the psychological balance, forcing McLaren to make decisions that could jeopardize its master plan for 2026. Conversely, if McLaren reacts in time and halts Verstappen's momentum at one of those events, it can consolidate its position and regain narrative control of the season. But to do so, it will need much more than talent. It will have to take risks. It will have to invest. And above all, it will have to trust that its driver duo will be able to withstand the increasing pressure of competing against one of the best in history at the top of their game. And here another factor comes into play: the driver market. Although all eyes are on the track, what happens off it can determine the competitive balance of the near future. If rumors about a possible Ferrari offer for Verstappen gain traction, as has been suggested in recent weeks, other teams could start making moves sooner than expected. The Dutch driver's entourage hasn't ruled out any scenario, and if Red Bull wants to secure his continuity, it will have to offer him more than a fast car. It will have to guarantee him full influence in the development of the new regulations, and that's not something that's negotiated in a single meeting. Some already claim that Max could be waiting to see how the RB21 performs in the next 5 races before deciding whether to stay with the team or activate the exit clauses that may still be in effect in his contract. In that context, every win or loss doesn't just affect the points table, it affects the future of the entire F1 championship. So what's coming up isn't just a simple Grand Prix series. It's a crossroads. This is the part of the championship where the true intentions of each team and each driver are defined. Those who think short-term must deliver immediate results. Those who think long-term will have to decide if they are willing to pay the price of the present. And in the midst of all this, Max Verstappen, steady, confident, increasingly dominant, observes, decides, and executes. Because at this point in the season, the difference is no longer just about who has the best car. It's about who knows how to use it best, who reads the moment best, and who is able to impose their will at every turn, at every pit stop, in every corner.